From unexplained 2,000-year-old machines to entire lost cities, these wild underwater discoveries could change everything we know about our oceans and our past. Just off the Bahama Islands lies an ancient underwater road from centuries past that once led to Atlantis, or so some people think. First discovered in the 60s, Bimini Road is a bunch of stones laid down next to each other like massive cobblestones. The artifact suddenly starts and ends, implying that it's a small part of a long-lost causeway. However, the big question was, how did it get underwater in the first place? There weren't any large civilizations centered on the Bahamas, leading to the theory that it was part of an ancient highway to a long-lost civilization.
This part of the Bahamas has been underwater for thousands of years.
Making things even stranger, the Bimini Road matched a prediction made in 1938 by American mystic Edgar Cayce, who stated, "A portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages and seawater near Bimini, expected in 68 or 69, not so far away." Wouldn't you know it, Bimini Road was discovered in 1968. To this day, scientists can't agree on what their whole deal is. Some believe that Bimini Road is just an unusual natural rock formation, while others insist it's evidence of cataclysmic changes in the Earth's past and a remnant of something long lost to the sands of time. In 2011, Swedish diving team Ocean X explored the bottom of the Baltic Sea and discovered something odd, a huge, strange stone disk on the bottom of the sea. It was 60 meters wide and covered in straight lines and right angles. For all intents and purposes, it looked like the Millennium Falcon had plopped down right on the seafloor. Plenty of interesting and unusual things have been found at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, but this discovery caused UFO hunters and conspiracy theorists to go nuts. Theories lit up the internet. Was it an ancient UFO that crashed there millennia ago? It sure looked too artificial to believe that it was naturally made. It even looked like it had stairs off to the side. And speculation was further inflamed by reports from researchers that described electromagnetic interference near the object. And then there's the dating. It's at least 20,000 years old. The likely truth is a little less exciting. It's probably a glacial deposit. The entire region is a hotbed for glacial activity, and this baffling object, as unique as it is probably simply a remnant of that. Still, even the team that discovered it doesn't agree with that theory due to the metallic makeup of the object.
The substance and can only be produced of somebody, man-made.
In 1900, a diver looking for sea sponges swam 150 feet below the surface of the Aegean Sea, near the Greek island of Antikythera, and found a whole lot more than sea sponges. He discovered an entire shipwreck, later confirmed to be a shipping vessel bound for Rome, dating to the 1st century BC. Researchers recovered priceless treasures of antiquity, including coins, pottery, sculpture, and most intriguingly, an unidentifiable box made of oxidized bronze and wood covered in simple machinery. It resembled some kind of practical device, but investigators remained largely stumped until the 1970s and 1980s, when imaging technology became sophisticated enough to be used to digitally examine the interior of the so-called Antikythera mechanism. As well as discovering markings in ancient Greek and other various symbols, scientists counted 82 individual pieces in the box, including 35 gears, shafts, axles, and pointers. Theorized to be about a third of a much larger now-lost machine, the Antikythera mechanism is the earliest analog mechanical computer ever discovered. It was likely used in ancient Rome as a calendar and astronomical events guide. Driven by a hand crank, the gears would sync up and move dials around to point to dates and months, while also predicting the sky positions of the sun, moon, and 5 known planets at the time. Testing indicates that the computer was built in the 2nd century BC, and its clock-like machinery predates similar tech developed in Europe by at least 1,000 years. Unfortunately, though, it's probably not a time machine. Probably.
Truk, a tropical atoll on the eastern tip of the Caroline Islands. Its lagoon a burial ground for a vast fleet of ships.
By 1944, World War II was going really badly for the Japanese. Allied forces had achieved air superiority, and United States bombers could fly all over the Pacific, striking at Japanese ships without much fear of retribution. Nonetheless, the Japanese made the bizarre decision to keep the bulk of their navy in one place, the Truk Lagoon in the Caroline Islands. The Allies launched a massive 2-day air raid against the lagoon, after which the Japanese had lost 50 ships and 250 airplanes, which was a huge chunk of their remaining fleet. At the time, there was still a war to fight, so the Americans didn't have time to clean up the island, and all of the sunken wreckage got left at the bottom of the ocean. Divers started re-exploring the lagoon in the 60s, revealing the eerie underwater graveyard. The ships, airplanes, and even tanks are in nearly pristine condition, and creepily, most of them still had the bodies of sailors inside of them. The bodies have since been removed, and tourists can now make a dive to the graveyard, but it's not exactly safe. Ragged metal edges of the blasted ships can easily cut through skin, which would only be a minor annoyance if the waters weren't shark-infested, but as it happens, they very much are. As fascinating as the sight is, it has an unfortunate downside. The old-school tech has also been leaking toxic oil and fuel into the water for 70 years now.
Only centuries from now will every trace of man's folly vanish from the bottom of Truk Lagoon.
Various governments around the world run ocean listening networks that, aside from keeping an ear on other nations' marine movements, are used to study glaciers, volcanic activity, and animal migration. But they have also recorded creepy sounds from the deep. One of the strangest is known as Upsweep, a periodic rising sound that's been picked up since 1991. It has the same ethereal, otherworldly vibe as the soundtrack to 2001: A Space Odyssey whenever the monolith is on screen, but this is no science fiction. Unlike other weird noises, Upsweep is periodic and uniform, without the randomness we'd expect from a natural occurrence, and it just keeps showing up with no explanation. At first, it was thought that Upsweep was the sound of seawater contacting underwater lava, but the sound profile didn't match, nor did the fact that it has been detected over and over like clockwork. Since 1991, Upsweep has slowly gotten quieter, but it's still audible to underwater hydrophones. Even the official National Oceanic and Atmosphere Administration has no clue why this is happening. Until we know for sure, we're sticking with deep-sea monsters. The Upsweep isn't the only bizarre underwater noise that's been captured in the ocean depths. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration operates a network of hydrophones that listen for strange noises in the water. They were first put in place to pick up Soviet submarines, but they often pick up weird noises that don't have an immediate explanation. The best known one is the bloop, which sounds sort of like a bubble breaking the surface after a Cthulhu fart.
Nice.
But even though bloop sounds organic, it's most likely the sound of an iceberg breaking in two. Bloop might be the most popular of the NOAA mystery noises, but the other ones are even more interesting. First, there's Julia, which creepily sounds like somebody moaning into the hydrophones. That sound is also oddly organic, but NOAA claims that it's just ice and nothing that anybody needs to worry about. Another strange one is Train, a constant hum that echoes throughout the Antarctic. Finally, there's a mysterious sound Whistle, which only happened once. Whistle was also picked up by a single hydrophone, which is particularly unusual because such sounds typically echo throughout the ocean and get picked up in multiple locations. The NOAA says that it was probably an underwater volcano blowing up, so while not sea monsters, still not exactly comforting. The oceans are home to many species that really haven't changed for millions of years, but those creatures have nothing on a group of microbes found at the bottom of the ocean that have been alive since the Jurassic period. Researchers discovered the extraordinary organisms while digging sediment cores in the ocean. When they analyzed the samples, they found a colony of microbes that seemed barely alive. Further tests showed the oldest microbes in the colony were millions of years old, and had somehow survived all those years without food or sunlight, and with a minimal amount of oxygen to breathe while buried under a thick layer of ocean sediment. It shouldn't be possible for these organisms to still be alive, but, well, you know what they say.
Life, finds a way.
The secret to these microbes' incomprehensibly long life is their equally mind-bogglingly slow metabolism. For example, E. coli can divide every 17 minutes. These single-celled organisms are estimated to take 1,000 years to divide. So even though they're from the Jurassic era, they probably aren't the most exciting subject for a new theme park. Throughout the entire history of lunar exploration, when rockets soared into space during the 60s and 70s, scientists weren't too concerned where the booster engines and other equipment landed when jettisoned. As long as it didn't smash into a residential area, they were fine with it falling somewhere in the ocean. Basically, NASA was a bunch of heartless space litterers. Rocket parts are scattered among Earth's oceans, so it's nearly impossible to find them. But that didn't deter none other than Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. In 2012, he assembled a secret dive team to try and find the F-1 engines that shot the Apollo missions into orbit. He wasn't just content with any old engines, he wanted the ones from Apollo 11, the mission that landed men on the moon. After tons of searching, they found them, lying 14,000 feet below the ocean's surface. The engines were in remarkably good shape for hunks of metal that fell from space and slammed into the ocean. Bezos recovered them and quickly contacted NASA, who then claimed legal ownership over the engines they hadn't seen in 40 years. In August 2023, scientists working with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Seascape Alaska 5 expedition dispatched a series of remote-controlled underwater vehicles to explore the seafloor in the Gulf of Alaska. While mapping the habitats of various ocean creatures nearly 2 miles below the surface, the researchers spotted something baffling on one of the vehicle's cameras, and it was all live-streamed over the internet. Can you see what that is?
Snap zoom, please.
Okay, snapping.
That's better. As you can see, they'd come across a burnt gold item approximately 4 inches wide. Variously called an orb or blob, researchers participating in the broadcast theorized that the golden curiosity could be a shed egg casing, a stray piece of coral, or a sponge. What made the object even stranger was the small hole on one side, suggesting that some living thing might have crawled into or out of it. With the help of a suction tool, the orb was retrieved for further study. After thoroughly investigating the thing, the scientists were stumped. The Seascape Alaska 5 coordinator said in a statement via NOAA, "While we were able to collect the golden orb and bring it onto the ship, we still are not able to identify it beyond the fact that it is biological in origin." It just goes to show how little we actually know about the vast oceans of our world and what's living in them. It's an awe-inspiring, if a little creepy, thought.
I just hope when we poke it, something doesn't decide to come out.
UFO researchers love speculating about crop circles, even though most of them have turned out to be pranks. While the normal crop circles aren't especially mysterious anymore, when they started popping up at the bottom of the ocean, they raised more than a few skeptical eyebrows. Divers off the coast of Japan started seeing the strange patterns in 1995, each one about 7 feet in diameter. As it turns out, the underwater circles are naturally occurring. The real explanation isn't quite on the same level of weird as aliens, but it is fascinating nonetheless. Male pufferfish are the culprits. They spend 10 days creating the circular patterns to impress potential mates. During mating season, the females swim around the ocean looking for the coolest circles and lay their eggs in the middle of the ones they deem to be the best. Nobody knows how the female pufferfish make their decision, but they evidently have more refined aesthetic tastes than your run-of-the-mill ocean ladies. Even after winning the underwater circle dating game, the work of the male pufferfish is not yet done. He has to raise the eggs and go on to the next patch of sand to build another nest. Think your life is repetitive and pointless? The entire existence of the male pufferfish boils down to drawing circles in the sand. The coelacanth is an ancient species of fish, and it's an unusual one to say the least. It's got singular features like an additional tail lobe, fins that look like human arms and legs when they move, and a semi-developed spinal column.
Did you know this fish is more closely related to mammals like you and other tetrapods than it is to other fishes?
These striking creatures are also the only animals on Earth with a useful intercranial joint, a hinge that splits the fish's ears and brain from its eyes and nasal passages, that lets it lift up the front of its own head to make eating easier. Perhaps the weirdest fact of all is that until the early 20th century, the prevailing scientific wisdom was that the coelacanth had gone extinct 70 million years ago. In December 1938, a fishing boat caught one in a net in South Africa. The crew thought it was a strange specimen and let the closest museum in the town of East London know about it. That facility contacted ichthyologist Dr. J.L.B. Smith, who correctly identified the fish as a coelacanth. A subsequent expedition found a small population near the Comoros Islands, between the African mainland and Madagascar. 60 years later, a second type of coelacanth was found, this time a brown one in Indonesia. A fishing boat scooped it up in 1998 and sold it to a fish market, where a vacationing marine biologist happened to spot it and recognize it. Because of the different color, this was classified as a second species of coelacanth. Rivers might not sound like the sort of thing you could find underwater because they're, already underwater. But given the right combination of water conditions, fully submerged rivers actually can form, distinct from the water that surrounds them. The biggest and best underwater river is in the Yucatan Peninsula, where at the bottom of the sea there's a thin layer of hydrogen sulfate, which basically acts as a barrier between 2 layers of water. It's not something a diver will feel when passing through, but it creates a secondary body of water below the proper ocean. This isn't some strange formation that divers nicknamed an underwater river just because it sort of looks like one. Fallen leaves cover the dirt banks of the river, and submerged trees dot the edges. Besides being underwater, it looks just like a normal terrestrial river. There's nothing else quite like it in the world. Throughout the world's oceans are groups of little manganese nodules hanging out, slowly growing. How they grow isn't too much of a mystery. Manganese gets dissolved in the ocean water and slowly accretes onto other clumps of the metal, like chunky, ugly pearls. Because they're so easy to harvest, mining companies were pumped when they were discovered, and now many of them harvest the metal from the ocean's surface. Finding vast beds of metal balls on the ocean floor is strange enough, but what is even stranger is when they're found in a place that they're not expected to be, the tropical Atlantic Ocean. In 2015, a massive collection of manganese nodules was accidentally discovered east of Barbados by a German research vessel. Scientists have yet to confirm how they even formed in the first place, and the 42-day expedition that analyzed the nodules was unable to determine their origin. Theorists believe they might have been started by ancient underwater microbes, or they're just a natural result of ancient oceans, which might have been more metallic. The west coast of Italy is loaded with calderas, or large holes left in the earth by spent volcanoes. All that volcanic activity naturally results in mineral water sources and hot springs. And over 2,000 years ago, those led to the creation of a resort and wellness retreat known as Baiae. Built in the 2nd century BC, Baiae became the place where ancient Rome's most rich and powerful went to relax and party. Much debauchery occurred among the villas, spas, pools, and grottos, and prominent figures like Virgil, Cicero, and Pliny kept vacation homes in Baiae. All the natural forces that made Baiae were also responsible for its demise. Hydrothermal and seismic action slowly pushed the city into the Mediterranean Sea.
It was slowly abandoned in the 7th century, as parts had begun sinking.
While there were historical accounts of Baiae, its remnants weren't discovered until the 1940s, when an aerial photo captured a glimpse of one of the city's structures about to break through the surface of the water. In the 1960s, the Italian government sent a submarine to explore the sunken city of Baiae, and in 2002, the ruins were opened up as an underwater archaeological park. The Fury and Hecla Strait is a body of water in northern Canada that has a strange claim to fame. All throughout the summer, boatmen on the water hear mysterious humming or pinging sounds. Oddly, the sounds travel exclusively through the water and are only audible when they reverberate through the hulls of boats. Nobody knows why it's happening, though there are tons of theories going around, most of them blaming Baffinland Iron Mines Corporation mining, Arctic research stations, or Greenpeace conservation efforts involving migrating whales. All the groups connected to this phenomenon made thorough investigations, and yet couldn't find anything they were doing that might create it. Even the military stepped in to try to figure out what was going on, but nothing was discovered. So far, the sounds still remain an utter mystery. War is expensive business, and the last thing that England wanted in World War II was to lose to the Nazis just because they were strapped for cash. Before the internet and global online banking, that meant silver and gold from the empire had to be loaded onto ships and sailed around the world. That's dangerous work when Nazi U-boats are in the waters. In 1942, the SS City of Cairo sailed from India with 100 tons of silver coins to help out the war effort. Unfortunately, they decided to sail without an escort, and a U-boat found the ship and blew it to pieces. All of that silver bullion sunk to the bottom of the ocean, and the SS City of Cairo joined the multitudes of shipwrecks lost to the ocean. For decades, well over $50 million of silver at today's prices just sat at the bottom of the ocean, with only the fish around to use it. Finally, it was rediscovered, and the United Kingdom financed a team to grab it, probably with strict orders to take none of the coins for themselves. Upon retrieval, the money was returned to England, where most of it was melted down, although a few thousand were painstakingly restored to be sold to coin collectors. In 2007, a team of divers decided to explore Hoyo Negro, a cave found 150 feet underwater inside of a submerged cave system in the Yucatan Peninsula in eastern Mexico. Amongst the rocks, plants, sea life, and debris in this very remote spot, the divers also found human remains. The well-preserved skeleton was an almost totally complete bone system of what scientists quickly determined to be a teenage girl.
It's pristine. It's fantastic.
7 years after the divers' discovery, the results of the mitochondrial DNA analysis on the bones revealed a few very interesting surprises. The young woman, nicknamed Naya after the water nymph of ancient Greek mythology, was 15 or 16 years old when she died, which happened when she fell into a dark pit. She lived somewhere around 12,000 to 13,000 years ago, making this skeleton one of the oldest ever found in the Western Hemisphere. Naya shared DNA with some Native American groups currently living in the US, but also had genetic material indicating East Asian descent. This links the skeleton to ancestors who likely crossed over from Asia into the Americas via the Bering Land Bridge, the theorized now underwater connecting point between Siberia and Alaska. When working on an oil rig, the last thing anybody wants is a giant sea monster to show up. But that's exactly what happened in 2012, when cameras on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico picked up something strange. Out of nowhere, a huge amorphous blob of flesh appeared, circled the rig, and disappeared back into the ocean. While extraterrestrial visitors have been ruled out, the actual explanation is still extraordinary. Biologists identify the creature as Deepstaria enigmatica, which sounds like a pretty dope progressive metal band, but is actually a massive jellyfish, albeit one that looks more like a misshapen blob of brown flesh than the pretty delicate jellyfish we see in aquariums. It's rarely seen and usually hangs out in deep water, where it grows to absurd sizes. So biologists now know what it is, but why did the jellyfish try to come hang out with an oil rig? They aren't known for friendliness, but for some as yet unknown reason, this giant specimen took a liking to our oil rig. Hopefully, they aren't planning some sort of takeover. All over the oceans, researchers have underwater listening devices that are designed to track whales. Every whale species has distinctive calls, so whale experts can easily identify what they're listening to, at least until they heard the 52 Hertz whale. Since 1989, this whale has stumped researchers because it's the only one in existence that calls at that specific frequency.
It's like speaking a totally foreign language to all other whales of its kind.
People tracking the whale, named 52, say that it always travels alone. They've never heard it with other whales or heard any other whales calling at 52 Hertz. It is possible that 52 is looking for other whales of its species, constantly calling out for some company. Sadly, it appears that no other whales of its species ever hear it, and it's been dubbed the loneliest whale in the world. Nobody knows exactly how this happened, and even stranger, nobody has ever seen the lonely cetacean. It has only ever been heard, like a ghost in the ocean. One day we might find it, but for now, 52 is an inspirational icon for people who love solitude. Here's a stumper. According to old maps, Bermeja was an island off the coast of Mexico. It showed up on maps as far back as the 17th century, but sometime around the 1800s, the whole island disappeared. People kept looking for it in its last known location, and the British supposedly found the island in 1844, reporting it a few hundred feet below the ocean's surface. However, nobody could verify their claims. Some enterprising researchers uncovered an 1857 map from the United States that featured Bermeja, and Mexican maps and documents included the island up to 1946. The Mexican government sent out an expedition to the location in 1997, but reported there was nothing there. So what's going on here? If the island existed, it was above the water at least until 1844. In 1997, the Mexican and United States governments agreed to drill for oil off the coast of Mexico, and then poof, the island supposedly stopped existing. A lot of people think the island was deliberately blown up. These aren't just crackpot theorists either. Mexican senators are on the record pushing the theory, although that still wouldn't explain the much older British claim. In 1987, Kiyotaro Aratake, head of tourism for Japan's Yonaguni Island, was looking for a good diving point in the nearby sea. While swimming around, he happened upon a series of unusual rock formations. And unusual is putting it lightly. He stumbled across a site full of flat surfaces, symmetrical shapes, roads, stair steps, a spiral staircase, a pyramid, an arch, and even what looked like a stadium. But while the discovery was monumental, it wasn't exactly clear, and still isn't, what Aratake found. Most scientific analysis holds that the monuments are naturally occurring, carved by water over thousands of years. Others think differently, including Ryukyu University's Professor Masaki Kimura, who led the first exploratory expedition of what became known as the Yonaguni Monument. He said, "I think it's very difficult to explain away their origin as being purely natural because of the vast evidence of man's influence on the structures." Aratake personally thinks that the Yonaguni Monument is all that remains of a lost sunken city built in 12,000 BC.
It seems to be that whatever this structure is, somebody built it there.
Over the past few decades, whales have been acting strange. For some reason, whales are singing lower and lower each year. The mysterious behavior isn't restricted to just one group of whales singing deeper. Whales around the world are doing the same thing and at the same rate. Whales from different parts of the world are dropping the pitch of their calls at the same time, but without being physically around each other. While coordinating between whales on such a wide scale might seem impossible, it appears to be happening quite quickly too. Some species of whales, blue whales in particular, are now singing several notes lower than how they were singing in the 1960s. Countless explanations for this change have been proposed by the marine biology community. The leading theory is that since whales are dying off, they have to drop the tone of their calls to make it resonate better in the water, since it has to travel farther to reach another whale. Other marine biologists think the whales are responding to new ocean dynamics or noise pollution, or even that they have developed a new mating strategy. Stonehenge is mysterious enough as is, but finding another Stonehenge underwater, that's a whole new level of strange. However, that appeared to be what divers found in 2007, and in a place generally not thought of as a very mysterious place, Lake Michigan. The structure is believed to date back as far as 10,000 BC, and one appears to have a carving of a mastodon on it. Because they're underwater, they have degraded much more than the above-water British Stonehenge, so the carving has yet to be confirmed, but the other comparisons have faded away as researchers map the site. Since they're surrounded by a wealth of prehistoric hunting artifacts, leading theories state that the stones were part of structures designed to corral prey animals. During that glacial period thousands of years ago, the basin of Lake Michigan was dry, before the melting of the Great North American Ice Sheet eventually filled it with water. In 1977, Alvin, the first ever submersible designed for tremendous oceanic depths, carried a group of geologists to an oceanic spreading ridge near the Galapagos archipelago. They were looking for the source of a recently noted and unexplained temperature shift, and they found it. Naturally formed chimney-like structures that churned out extremely hot, murky mineral water. These vents stood as high as a 10-story building and started from a depth of more than 8,300 feet. This marked the first discovery of hydrothermal vents anywhere on the planet. In the Earth's crust layer, minerals dissolve in liquid and get released through these vents, or black smokers, where the cold ocean water cools down the black mineral-rich fluid as it disperses into the sea.
Black smokers on the sea floor bring up valuable raw materials from inside the Earth.
Anytime someone mentions valuable raw materials, you know there's an interest in harvesting those materials for industry, and there are indeed several companies in the process of starting mining operations. Fortunately, there are also conservation interests. Because the scorching hot liquid is so full of valuable nutrients, it's surrounded by unique life forms that use a process called chemosynthesis, allowing them to thrive where no sunlight can penetrate.